Dr. Jasmine, your natural holistic health and wellness guide on this journey we call life. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today starts off our hormones and hair growth series. This is part one of two, so definitely look out for part two. But this part is going to focus more on those male hormones in the perimenopausal woman. So let's jump in. All right. So male hormones. Male hormones are known as androgens in the body. Androgens are the hormones that make men have the male characteristics that they have. So, the deeper voice, the beard, when little boys go through puberty and they start sprouting hair everywhere and they have a deep voice, their muscular build, that's from androgens. And testosterone is the main player that is produced in the testes. Now, dihydrotestosterone is another androgen that's actually produced from testosterone. So, makes sense why men are more susceptible to this because testosterone is their main player. In hair loss, we often see that men are producing this at a higher rate, or their follicles may be a little more sensitive. And I find this is more associated with like genetic factors. So, like your dad or your grandpa, your uncles, your brothers, they're also having this. It's more than likely that you're just a little more sensitive, even if you have the same amount of DHT as the next guy. Now, this is produced by an enzyme that's pretty important called 5 alpha reductase. So, when this enzyme's activity has been upregulated, we're going to get more of our testosterone converted to DHT, which causes the follicle to shrink. Right? So, if the follicle's shrinking, there's less space, less availability, real estate wise, and that tells the hair to shed. And over time, this can lead to less growth. Now, this conversion, this 5 alpha reductase, can be stimulated by a few different factors. So, lifestyle habits like smoking, excessive alcohol intake, a lack of exercise, these can all be roles or not roles, but can all be playing a role in why men may be making more DHT and potentially a little more susceptible to its effects. Now, in women, when we start going through perimenopause and menopause, our bodies change, right? That's why it's called the change. This typically happens around age 45 in a majority of women. It can happen a little sooner if, there's some other things going on. It can happen later. For women, if you're trying to figure out when this might happen for you, look at your mom or your grandma, kind of see when they went through it. That's a kind of a good gauge of when you may start experiencing some of those changes. Um, the uterus. Now, if your uterus is removed, say you had a hysterectomy, there were some other things going on, and it was surgically removed, then you'll begin menopause unless you had like a partial and your ovaries were kept intact. So if your ovaries are still there, you'll still be producing progesterone and estrogen, but you won't actually bleed because you don't have a uterus. And then your last menstrual period or your last menstrual cycle, if this was a year ago, then that's a sign that menopause has hit. That's kind of the way that women can know, like, yep, I'm in it if you've gone a full year without a period. And then some of the symptoms of menopause are those vasomotor symptoms like hot flashes. We can also see vaginal dryness, insomnia, mood changes. All right. So that's what menopause is. And so because of this, we get a hormonal shift. So, in our next part, we're going to talk about like the menstruating woman and what that looks like. But at that age, when we start to change, our dominance shifts. So, instead of being estrogen and progesterone dominant because the ovaries are no longer producing these hormones, testosterone becomes the main player, right? So it's like, okay, I went from estrogen, progesterone now to this testosterone. As we just learned, testosterone converts to that DHT. So now we might be developing more sensitivity to DHT. We're also just making more of it, uh, or not necessarily making more of it, but we're more affected by it because we don't have the dominance of estrogen progesterone anymore. So this can lead to hair loss in this stage of life for some women, even women that maybe had no issues with their hair until they got to menopause. And this is just a note, if you are doing any HRT or hormone replacement therapy, you can see some shedding with increased excess estrogen, progesterone from exogenous or outward sources. So this is something to keep in mind. It does not happen to everyone, but it's just something to keep in mind if you do see that and you're using these types of therapies. So let's talk about some of the herbs, right? How can we help our body through this natural, normal part of life? It's not something we can reverse. It's not something we can prevent. It's just one of those things that we have to come to accept. But how do we do that gracefully, right? So these are some of my favorite herbs. Maca. This one is a ancient herb used to help balance those sex hormones as we start that transition. It really helps to increase communication between various glands and organs in your body. So we have a hypothalamus that tells your pituitary to release certain hormones to talk to your ovaries. Well, in menopause, that kind of gets mucked up, if you will. So we want to kind of encourage still proper communication, and maca helps us do that. Red clover, hops, flax, these are all considered phytoestrogens, or they act as plant estrogens. So this can help alleviate some of those symptoms that we're seeing with menopause. This can help us gracefully transition from that estrogen dominance to more of that testosterone dominance. Hops, this one is really nice because it's also a natural sedative. So if you're experiencing any like insomnia with your change, this might be something nice to consider. It also has a active antioxidant called 8-phenyl. Okay, that's a mouthful, but this has been shown not only to reduce those menopausal symptoms, but also increase healthy hair growth. And then flax, this is a wonderful fiber rich, omega fatty acid rich nuts. And the lignans or the compounds in them, that's what is used by the body as like a phytoestrogen to again help with that transition. So it's less of a shock on the body and just again more graceful and peaceful. Now, as men and as women that are going through that change, we want to kind of, help our body not make so much of that DHT if we can. So, reducing some of those stimulators, right? So, improving our diets. So, getting rid of those processed foods, those trans fats, those simple sugars. We want to support liver metabolism. So, if our liver metabolism is decreased, you might see more effects on that 5 alpha reductase activity, stress, endocrine disruptors like phthalates, and then, of course, hormonal shifts, natural ones and ones that maybe might fall into a disease state, which we'll talk a little bit more about in the next part. But for this video, hormonal shifts associated with menopause. Blockers are going to be herbs like saw palmetto, stinging nettles, bacopa, pumpkin seed oil, and African cherry tree bark. These are going to be your natural blockers. There are some prescription ones. If you've ever talked to your doctor about your hair, you've probably heard of finasteride and dutasteride. Those are prescription 5 alpha reductase inhibitors. But these are the natural options. So, by adding these, we just reduce how much is actually available and thus less effect on those follicles and that shrinkage. So to kind of close it all out, if you will, the human reproductive system is such a major player. Okay. If we're making too much hormone or if we're going through shifts, our hair is going to respond. Men being that DHT being the major factor. So reducing those lifestyle factors that might be increasing your risk, especially if you do have like a genetic piece, I always say change what you can. And your genetics, unfortunately, you can't do too much about those. But if you can change your lifestyle, your diet, your stress, that can at least reduce how much of that is available and, just support your ability to grow healthy hair. And then women, as we move through menopause, when we get to that age, trying to do it as gracefully as possible because you will start to become a little more testosterone dominant and more affected by DHT. So adding in some of those phytoestrogen herbs, also those DHT inhibitors can be really nice to help just support overall that hormonal shift that we will naturally go through. So that's all for part one. Thanks so much, guys, for taking the time to watch this video and just be here and present with me. If you have any questions, feel free. Please comment, like, and subscribe for more content. And then definitely stay tuned. Part two is coming. So, ladies, if you are in that menstruating age, this might not have been for you, but I did not forget you. If you would like consulting with me, Dr. Jasmine, please feel free to visit me at my website. It's www.drjasmine.com, and that's Jasmine with a Y. That's all I have for you today. Again, thanks so much. May God bless you and your health. Bye.